The early autumn wind rattled the golden leaves of the century-old elm trees lining North 30th Street in Omaha, Nebraska. 74-year-old Thaddeus Sterling sat on his front porch, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand, gazing across the expansive front yard of his two-story, brick craftsman home. For 42 years, Thaddeus had served as a chief land appraiser and urban planning consultant for the state of Nebraska. His long career had been defined by rigorous precision, an unmatched knowledge of municipal zoning laws, and an ability to evaluate complex land deeds down to the exact boundary inch. To Thaddeus, land was not merely dirt and concrete. It was history, legally bound and meticulously recorded. His quiet morning was interrupted by the heavy rumble of a modified sports car pulling into the driveway. Out stepped his 35-year-old son-in-law, Bradford Hayes. Bradford was a slick, fast-talking former real estate speculator who always wore tailored suits that exceeded his income. Over the past 2 years, Bradford's high-risk land flipping schemes had collapsed under shifting interest rates, leaving him drowning in over $100,000 of unregistered, high-interest debt owed to predatory, private lenders in Council Bluffs. "Morning, Thaddeus," Bradford called out, forcing a wide, enthusiastic smile as he adjusted his sunglasses and jogged up the porch steps. "Great news in the local paper today. The State Department of Transportation just finalized the North Expressway expansion project." Thaddeus took a slow sip of his coffee, his sharp hazel eyes observing Bradford's fidgety posture, the slight tremor in his fingers, and the restless shifting of his weight. "I know, Bradford," Thaddeus replied calmly, his voice deep and measured. "I served on the initial route evaluation committee 10 years ago. The state is exercising its powers of eminent domain to acquire 20 properties along this corridor. And your property is the crown jewel of the entire acquisition zone." Bradford chimed in, leaning over the porch railing with manic energy. "The official state condemnation valuation came through this week. $500,000 for the house and the 2-acre lot. $500,000 in guaranteed state funds." Thaddeus set his mug down on the small iron table beside his chair. "It is a fair valuation for 40 years of care and maintenance. The funds will be disbursed directly into my primary estate trust next month to secure Clara's future." At the mention of Clara, Thaddeus's daughter, a dedicated livestock veterinarian who was currently away at a regional agricultural conference, Bradford's eyes flashed with a brief, desperate hunger. Bradford was facing a terrifying deadline. The loan sharks had given him until Friday afternoon to deliver a lump sum payment of $100,000 or face immediate, violent seizure of his remaining vehicles and assets. In Bradford's mind, Thaddeus' $500,000 eminent domain payout wasn't state compensation for an old man's home, it was his personal financial lifeline. "That's actually why I came by early today, Thaddeus," Bradford said smoothly, reaching into his leather briefcase and pulling out a thick manila folder labeled Nebraska DOT, Property Acquisition Packet. "Clara asked me to drop off the preliminary municipal clearance forms. The state has streamlined the payout process this year through an expedited escrow portal, but they require all property owners to execute the disbursement authorization forms by noon tomorrow." Thaddeus looked at the folder, then raised his gaze to meet his son-in-law's nervous, overly eager eyes. "Clara asked you to bring this?" Thaddeus asked softly. "Yes. She called me from the clinic in Lincoln this morning," Bradford lied seamlessly, offering a rehearsed nod. "She knew you didn't like driving down to the state Treasury office in downtown Omaha, so I volunteered to handle the filing and courier service for you. Family takes care of family." Thaddeus remained silent for a long moment. He knew his daughter's communication habits better than anyone. Clara always called him directly on her morning drive. She had mentioned no such paperwork when they spoke at 7 o'clock. "Put the folder on the workbench inside, Bradford," Thaddeus said, standing up steadily. "I will review the state forms after my morning walk." Bradford hesitated, his smile stiffening slightly. "Sure thing, Thaddeus. Just remember, the state portal closes at noon tomorrow. I'll come back tonight to pick up the signed packet, so I can drop it off at the Treasury first thing in the morning." As Bradford walked inside to place the folder on the foyer table, he pulled a thin, custom-printed legal page from his inner coat pocket and subtly slipped it into the middle of the official state documents stack. Garrett's deadly trap was laid. He believed his father-in-law was just an old pensioner eager to sign away bureaucratic paperwork. He had no idea he was dealing with the man who had written the state's land acquisition guidelines 30 years ago. After Bradford's sports car sped away down North 30th Street, Thaddeus walked into his quiet hallway. He picked up the manila folder from the oak table, carried it into his sunlit study, and laid it under the bright LED inspection lamp on his desk. Thaddeus pulled his reading glasses from his shirt pocket, placing them over his nose with methodical calm. For 42 years as a chief appraiser, his eyes had reviewed tens of thousands of state land title instruments, condemnation orders, and escrow disbursements. He possessed a photographic memory for municipal document formatting and legal font standards. He opened the folder and slowly flipped through the pages. Pages 1, 2, and 3 were genuine State Department of Transportation acquisition forms, standard public notices that any property owner in the condemnation corridor would receive. But when Thaddeus reached the 4th page, his thumb instantly froze against the margin. To an untrained eye, page 4 looked identical to the official state forms. It carried the state seal at the top, complete with legal jargon and signature lines at the bottom. However, Thaddeus's trained eyes caught 3 critical discrepancies within seconds. First, the state seal at the top was printed in standard black inkjet ink rather than the state's mandatory anti-forgery, raised blue embossed seal. Second, the font used for the document body was Times New Roman, whereas the Nebraska Department of Transportation had mandated Helvetica New on all official escrow forms since 2018. Finally, the document title, hidden beneath a deceptive banner labeled Addendum C, Municipal Escrow and Representative Account Authorization, contained a sinister clause tucked into the 3rd paragraph of fine print. The property owner hereby irrevocably designates Bradford Hayes as the authorized escrow agent and sole account payee for all eminent domain compensation funds, 500,000 disbursed under parcel ID 884 Omame, directing the Nebraska State Treasury to release all funds directly into his designated commercial account. Thaddeus leaned back in his leather armchair, a cold, dangerous calm settling over his heart. Bradford hadn't just brought him routine state paperwork, he had engineered an outright takeover of the $500,000 state payout. If Thaddeus signed this packet without reading it, the state treasury would wire his entire life's equity directly into Bradford's personal bank account, leaving Thaddeus with no recourse once the money was transferred and laundered through Bradford's debt collectors. "A predator in my own family," Thaddeus murmured, his voice as hard as cold steel. Rather than confronting Bradford immediately or tearing up the document, Thaddeus reached into his desk drawer and retrieved a small, black fountain pen with a violet casing. It was no ordinary pen. It was loaded with optically activated fluorophore ink, a specialized UV-reactive forensic ink used by state surveyors to invisible markland surveys and property boundary markers. Under ambient daylight, the ink dried completely invisible to the naked eye. But under a 365 nanometer ultraviolet light, it glowed with a brilliant, unmistakable neon blue radiance. Thaddeus lowered the pen to the signature line on the fraudulent page 4. He signed his full name, Thaddeus R. Sterling, in standard black ink. But directly above the signature line, using the invisible UV fountain pen, he wrote a series of microscopic legal codes. Void, executed under duress. A fraudulent misrepresentation. State 28, 511, active. Any computer scanner equipped with standard state security UV validation mandatory at every Nebraska State Treasury teller counter would instantly trigger a high-priority financial fraud alarm upon processing the page. Thaddeus capped his UV pen, placed the signed document back into the manila folder, and picked up his smartphone. He dialed a direct line he hadn't used since his retirement. Nebraska Financial Crimes Task Force, Detective Vance speaking. Marcus, Thaddeus said, his baritone voice perfectly composed. It's Thaddeus Sterling. I have an active felony fraud in progress involving an eminent domain disbursement check at my residence. Detective Vance's tone immediately sharpened. Thaddeus, whose target on the file? My son-in-law, Bradford Hayes, Thaddeus answered coldly. He has inserted a forged escrow assignment deed into my state acquisition file. He plans to submit it to the state treasury downtown at noon tomorrow to claim $500,000. Do you have physical possession of the forged document? Vance asked. I have signed it with my forensic UV distress code. Thaddeus revealed, a cold smile touching his lips. I am letting him walk it straight into your trap at the Treasury counter. The morning sun rose over the Missouri River, casting a crisp, amber glow across the concrete pillars of the Nebraska State Capitol and the surrounding municipal buildings in downtown Omaha. In his quiet study at North 30th Street, Thaddeus Sterling sat at his oak desk, sipping a cup of black tea. On the table lay the closed manila folder containing the signed acquisition packet. Under normal light, the signature on page 4 appeared to be nothing more than an old man's steady handwriting in black ink. But in Thaddeus's mind, that signature was a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate at the Treasury counter. At 8:30 a.m., the front door unlocked, and Bradford Hayes stepped into the hallway, his face wearing a mask of polite, rehearsed concern. Morning, Thaddeus, Bradford called out, taking quick, restless strides toward the study. His eyes were wide, encircled by dark shadows that revealed a night spent awake pacing his living room. His debt collectors in Council Bluffs had called him at midnight, reminding him that he had until 3:00 p.m. today to deliver $100,000 in cleared funds or face catastrophic consequences. Good morning, Bradford, Thaddeus replied smoothly, setting his teacup down without making a sound. Did you get a chance to go through the state packet? Bradford asked, his fingers twitching against the side of his coat as he eyed the manila folder on the desk. I'm heading downtown to the state treasury office right now to turn in the property clearances before the noon cutoff. Thaddeus picked up the folder, holding it casually in his hands. He watched Bradford's gaze lock onto the paper with the desperate intensity of a starving man staring at a feast. I signed every page where you placed the yellow tabs, Bradford, Thaddeus said, his voice completely calm and devoid of emotion. It's all executed. A surge of visible relief washed over Bradford's face. He practically snatched the folder from Thaddeus's hand, clutching it tightly against his ribs, as if it were a bag of gold. Excellent. You made the right choice, Thaddeus, Bradford said, his voice rising in pitch with manic excitement. The state moving fast on these highway projects means you don't have to worry about managing this old house anymore. I'll take care of all the escrow transfers and banking logistics. You just relax. Make sure you hand the packet directly to the chief disbursement clerk at counter 4, Bradford, Thaddeus advised, looking his son-in-law straight in the eyes with a cool, piercing glare. The state has strict verification protocols for high-value eminent domain payouts. Don't worry about a thing, Thaddeus. I know how to handle state bureaucrats. Bradford laughed nervously, backing out of the study toward the front door. I'll call you the moment the disbursement clearance goes through. Thaddeus watched through the window as Bradford sprinted down the porch steps, jumped into his sports car, and tore down the driveway, leaving a trail of gray dust hanging in the cool morning air. The moment the car vanished around the corner, Thaddeus picked up his smartphone and tapped his speed dial. Detective Vance, a voice answered instantly. The target has retrieved the packet and is en route to the state Treasury building in downtown Omaha, Thaddeus reported coldly. He is driving a black sports coupe. He expects to present the forged escrow deed at counter 4 before noon. Our team is already embedded inside the Treasury security room, Thaddeus, Detective Vance confirmed. We have high-definition cameras set up at every teller window, and the chief clerk at counter 4 has been fully briefed on your UV forensic code. The moment he slides that paper under the scanner, the building goes on lockdown. I am leaving for the downtown plaza now, Thaddeus said, standing up and reaching for his heavy wool overcoat. My daughter Clara lands at Omaha Airport at 10:30 a.m. She will be joining us at the Treasury. Understood, Vance replied. Let's end this. At 10:45 a.m., Bradford Hayes parked his car in the underground garage beneath the Nebraska State Treasury building in downtown Omaha. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, but his face wore the smug, arrogant grin of a man who believed he was about to touch $500,000. He took the elevator up to the main atrium. The Treasury Hall was vast, featuring marble pillars, high vaulted ceilings, and a row of bulletproof glass teller counters. At the center of the hall sat counter 4, clearly marked, IHH value eminent domain municipal disbursements. Bradford straightened his tie, pulled the manila folder from his leather satchel, and strutted confidently up to the glass window. Behind the counter sat a senior state clerk named Arthur Sterling, no relation to Thaddeus, though he had worked under Thaddeus's municipal land committee a decade ago. Arthur looked up, his expression unreadable, as he adjusted his glasses. Next, Arthur said calmly, "Good morning," Bradford declared, sliding the yellow folder through the narrow stainless steel tray beneath the glass. I'm turning in the final property release and escrow assignment packet for parcel 84 Ome on North 30th Street. The property owner, Thaddeus Sterling, has designated me as the sole escrow payee for the $500,000 condemnation fund. Arthur didn't say a word. He pulled the folder into his workspace, opened it, and extracted page 4 the document Bradford had forged. To Bradford's annoyance, Arthur didn't immediately start typing into his computer. Instead, the clerk reached beneath his desk, pulled out a heavy black desktop document scanner equipped with a dual-spectrum ultraviolet lamp, and laid page 4 flat on the glass bed. Is there a problem? Bradford asked, a sudden spike of anxiety tightening his throat. It's a standard state release. Thaddeus signed it himself this morning. It's standard protocol for all state disbursements over $100,000, sir. Arthur replied smoothly, turning the machine on. Our system performs an automated forensic validation of the state seal and signature integrity. The scanner emitted a quiet, high-pitched hum. A vivid, 365-nanometer blue UV light flooded the document bed, illuminating the paper from underneath. Instantly, the monitor facing Arthur lit up in bright, glaring red text. Alert. Forensic Distress Code detected. State Statute 28587 active. Hidden UV text. Void. Executed under duress, no fraudulent misrepresentation. Status title frozen. Immediate law enforcement intervention required. Bradford couldn't see the monitor screen, but he saw Arthur's hand calmly press a hidden black button mounted beneath the counter edge. A fraction of a second later, a soft chime echoed through the atrium, followed by the heavy, metallic clunk of the main glass entry doors, electronically locking from the outside. Bradford's blood ran ice cold. Sweat instantly broke out across his forehead. "Hey, what's going on? Why did the doors lock?" "Please step to the side of the counter, Mr. Hayes," Arthur said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, as he slipped the document into an official evidence pouch. "Your packet is being reviewed by upper management." "No! Give me my paper back!" Bradford panicked, slamming his fist against the bulletproof glass. "Cancel the application. I want my folder back right now." "I'm afraid that paper is no longer your property, Mr. Hayes," a stern, commanding voice boomed from the center of the marble atrium. Bradford spun around. Standing near the central fountain was Thaddeus Sterling, flanked by his daughter Clara and Detective Marcus Vance of the Financial Crimes Task Force. Two uniformed state troopers stepped out from the side corridors, effectively cutting off every exit. Bradford backed up against the teller counter, his eyes wide with sheer, terrified disbelief. "Thaddeus? Clara? What? What are you doing here?" Thaddeus walked forward slowly, his boots clicking firmly against the polished marble floor, his gaze locked onto his son-in-law with the cold, unyielding precision of a judge pronouncing a final sentence. "I came to watch you hand over your own arrest warrant, Bradford," Thaddeus said softly. The echoing marble atrium of the Nebraska State Treasury building fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The soft hum of the central air conditioning was the only sound left as Bradford backed slowly against the bulletproof counter, his knuckles white against his leather satchel. "Clara, baby, listen to me," Bradford stammered, his voice rising into a frantic, high-pitched pitch as he stared at his wife. "This is a massive misunderstanding. The state bureaucrats screwed up the paperwork. I came here to protect your dad's money. I was setting up a secure high-yield escrow account for his $500,000 payout." Clara Sterling stepped past Detective Vance, her face pale, her jaw set tight. She looked at the man she had been married to for 4 years, seeing through his expensive suit and manic smile, for the very first time. "Don't call me baby, Bradford," Clara said, her voice shaking with quiet, burning fury. "I spoke to the state police 2 hours ago, when my plane landed. My father didn't ask you to come here. I didn't ask you to bring him forms. You lied to me about your double shifts. You lied about your real estate investments. And you tried to rob my father of every penny he spent 40 years earning. I did it for us," Bradford shouted, tears of panic brimming in his eyes as he looked around at the uniformed state troopers closing in on him. "I took a bad margin loan on a commercial land parcel in Council Bluffs. The interest spiked to 22%. The lenders were going to seize my sports car, my credit line, everything. I just needed a temporary $100,000 loan from the condemnation check to clear the bridge loan. I was going to put it all back by forging my signature on an irrevocable asset assignment deed," Thaddeus asked calmly, stepping up beside his daughter. He pulled his hands from his overcoat pockets, looking at Bradford through his reading glasses with cold, unyielding clarity. You thought because I was 74, I wouldn't notice the paper density, Thaddeus said, his deep baritone echoing off the marble pillars. You thought because I sat quietly on my porch, I didn't know the Department of Transportation changed their official document font to Helvetica New 8 years ago. You thought an old man was an easy target. Thaddeus, please. Bradford dropped to his knees on the marble floor, raising his cuffed hands in a pathetic gesture of desperation. Talk to the detective. Tell them it's a civil family dispute. If I get a felony conviction, my real estate license is revoked forever. I'll go to the state penitentiary. You aren't going to prison because of a family dispute, Bradford, Detective Vance interrupted, stepping forward and unholstering a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. You are going to prison because you attempted to execute a fraudulent conveyance against a state Treasury account, forged an official municipal instrument, and engaged in grand larceny, exceeding $500,000. Vance grabbed Bradford's arm, pulling him up from the floor with effortless strength and snapping the cold steel cuffs tightly around his wrists. Bradford Hayes, you are under arrest, Vance announced crisply, reading him his rights, as the two state troopers moved in to take custody of the satchel and evidence pouch. Bradford looked back over his shoulder as he was dragged toward the side security exit, his face contorted in sheer horror. Clara, please! Call a lawyer! Don't let them do this to me! Clara turned her back on him, refusing to give him a single glance as the heavy metal security doors clicked shut behind him. The echoes of Bradford's frantic shouts slowly faded down the secure holding corridor, leaving the vast Treasury atrium in tranquil silence. Arthur Sterling, the senior clerk, stepped out from behind counter 4 holding the sealed evidence pouch containing page 4. He walked over to Thaddeus, offering a warm, respectful nod to his former supervisor. It's good to see you, Mr. Sterling, Arthur said softly. Your UV forensic mark worked flawlessly. The scanner picked up the distress code the moment the document crossed the bed. Thank you, Arthur, Thaddeus replied, shaking the clerk's hand. Your quick reaction saved the state and my family a tremendous amount of administrative pain. Detective Vance approached the group, holding a digital tablet displaying the preliminary investigation report generated by the Financial Crimes Task Force. We've already executed an emergency freeze on Bradford's personal and commercial bank accounts, Vance informed Thaddeus and Clara. When our officers searched his vehicle in the underground garage 10 minutes ago, we found a notebook containing detailed transaction records from his private lenders in Council Bluffs, along with 3 other fake power of attorney templates he was planning to use on local senior citizens. Clara gasped, covering her mouth in shock. He was doing this to other people? He was building a predatory operation to stay ahead of his gambling and margin debts, Vance confirmed grimly. Because of your father's quick actions and immutable evidence, we aren't just protecting your family's $500,000 payout, we are stopping a serial elder fraud ring in its tracks. Vance turned to Clara and handed her a card. Miss Sterling, I know this has been a traumatic morning, but we will need you at the Central Precinct at 2 o'clock to sign the formal witness statements and complete the financial separation documentation. I'll be there, Detective, Clara said, her voice growing stronger with every passing second. My father's lawyer is already drafting the divorce petition as we speak. Good, Vance said, tipping his hat. Mr. Sterling, you are free to complete the true eminent domain disbursement filing whenever you are ready. Thaddeus walked back over to counter 4, pulled out the genuine state acquisition packet from his inner coat pocket, and laid it neatly on the counter. Arthur processed the genuine document in less than 3 minutes. A clean green confirmation banner flashed across the screen. Eminent domain disbursement approved. Parcel 884 Ome. Funds 500,000. Scheduled for direct deposit into the Thaddeus Sterling Estate Trust. Thaddeus signed the final official receipt using his standard black pen, clear, and without any distress markers. He took Clara by the arm, and together they walked out of the Treasury building into the bright, clear afternoon sunlight. The air was fresh, and the cloudless Nebraska sky stretched wide above them. The heavy steel door of Consultation Room B at the Douglas County Corrections Facility shut with a dull, echoing thud. The room was sterile and cold, smelling faintly of industrial floor cleaner and stale coffee. Sitting behind a scratched acrylic partition was Bradford Hayes. Striped of his tailored designer suit, he wore an oversized orange jumpsuit. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and his wrists were chafed red from handcuffs. Across the table sat Clara Sterling, accompanied by Arthur Pendleton, Thaddeus's longtime estate and family law attorney, who set a thick leather briefcase onto the metal table. "Clara," Bradford gasped, leaning frantically against the partition. "Thank God you came! You have to talk to your dad." "The public defender told me the district attorney is filing 3 Class B felony counts. They're talking about 5 to 12 years in state prison." Clara looked at her husband through the glass. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. There were no tears left in her eyes, only a quiet, resolute strength. "I didn't come here to talk about your criminal defense, Bradford," Clara said, her voice steady and measured. "I came to deliver this." Arthur Pendleton unlocked his briefcase, pulled out a blue leather folder, and slid it through the document slot at the bottom of the glass partition. "This is an expedited petition for dissolution of marriage, Mr. Hayes," Arthur stated with sharp legal precision. "Given the active felony indictments for financial exploitation and attempted grand larceny against your spouse's immediate family, Judge Rebecca Vance has already signed a temporary emergency financial protection order." Bradford looked down at the documents, his hands trembling violently. "Dissolution? Clara, no! We can work through this. I was sick. I had a gambling addiction. The options trading got out of hand." "You weren't sick, Bradford," Clara interrupted, her voice dropping into a cold, piercing tone. "You were greedy. You looked at my 74-year-old father, a man who welcomed you into his home, who supported your business ideas, who gave us his blessing, and you saw a bank account to plunder." "I was going to pay it back," Bradford shrieked, pressing his palms against the glass. "Once the expressway project cleared, the land values in Council Bluffs would have skyrocketed. I would have returned the $500,000 interest." "With what interest, Bradford?" Arthur Pendleton challenged, laying a financial audit sheet onto the table. "Our forensic accounting team reviewed your personal banking records this morning under a court subpoena. Over the last 18 months, you squandered over $110,000 on illegal margin accounts, took out 3 unauthorized secondary loans, and forged 2 separate commercial lease agreements. You were never going to pay anything back. You were drowning, and you tried to drag Thaddeus down with you." Bradford collapsed back into his steel chair, burying his face in his cuffed hands. "My life is over," he sobbed. "My real estate license is gone. Everything is gone." "You destroyed your life the moment you picked up that forged pen, Bradford," Clara said, standing up from her chair and buttoning her coat. "Sign the divorce papers. My attorney will handle the rest." Bradford stared at the blue folder lying on the metal table. the stark reality of his complete downfall settling over him like a suffocating shroud. With shaking fingers, he picked up the attached pen and signed the divorce petition and asset waiver forms, knowing he had no legal leverage left to fight. Clara took the signed documents from the slot, handed them to Arthur Pendleton, and walked out of the visitation block without looking back. Outside the Douglas County Courthouse, the afternoon sun shone brightly over the city plaza. Thaddeus Sterling stood near the steps, wearing his wool overcoat, waiting patiently for his daughter. Beside him stood Detective Vance, holding a sealed manila envelope containing the final evidence inventory. "It's finished, Dad," Clara said as she approached her father, releasing a long, cleansing breath into the cool autumn air. "The divorce papers are signed, and his claim to any family assets is permanently terminated." "You handled yourself with remarkable grace today, Clara," Thaddeus said gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We also have an update from the district attorney's office, Mr. Sterling," Detective Vance added, opening his file. "Given the mountain of forensic evidence, the UV distress signature, the high-definition Treasury security video, and the testimony from the state clerk, Bradford's public defender has advised him to enter a full guilty plea to all charges." "What will the sentence be?" Thaddeus asked. "He is facing a mandatory 7-year sentence in the Nebraska State Penitentiary for attempted grand larceny and Treasury fraud, with no possibility of parole for the first 4 years," Vance reported. "Furthermore, the state court has issued a permanent restraining order and a full restitution judgment covering all your legal fees." "Justice has taken its proper course," Thaddeus said with a quiet, satisfied nod. That evening, back at the Brick Craftsman House on North 30th Street, the atmosphere was peaceful and warm. The fireplace crackled in the living room, casting a cozy golden light across the hardwood floors and wooden bookshelves. Thaddeus sat in his favorite leather armchair, sipping warm tea, while Clara sat on the sofa reviewing blueprints for her new veterinary clinic expansion, a project funded entirely by her own career earnings and supported by her father's secure estate trust. The $500,000 eminent domain payout had cleared into the Thaddeus R. Sterling Estate Trust earlier that afternoon, safe, sound, and permanently protected behind dual trustee judicial safeguards. Thaddeus reached into his pocket and pulled out his black UV fountain pen. He held it up to the warm firelight, examining the smooth violet casing that had exposed a predator and saved his family's legacy. "You know, Clara," Thaddeus said softly, looking over at his daughter with a gentle smile, "in my 42 years appraising land, I learned that some people look at a foundation and see only dirt to be bought and sold. But a true foundation is built on integrity, foresight, and truth. Those are things money can never buy, and lies can never destroy." Clara smiled, looking up from her papers. "And our foundation is unbreakable, Dad." Thaddeus capped his pen and placed it back in his desk drawer. The road outside his home would soon be expanded into a modern highway, but the honor, legacy, and home of the Sterling family remained secure, unyielding, and unbroken. 6 months had passed since the dramatic autumn morning at the Nebraska State Treasury building. The harsh, freezing winter of the Midwest had melted away, giving path to a bright, vibrant spring across Omaha. The old elm trees along North 30th Street were bursting with fresh green leaves, and the air smelled of wet earth and blossoming lilac. In his sunlit study at the Brick Craftsman House, Thaddeus Sterling sat comfortably at his oak desk, wearing his gold-rimmed reading glasses as he reviewed a fresh stack of legal documents. Beside him sat Clara, looking rested, confident, and entirely free of the anxiety that had weighed on her during her marriage to Bradford. She was looking over architectural blueprints for her new regional veterinary surgical center, a project she was launching independently. A soft knock sounded at the front door, and Arthur Pendleton, the family's estate attorney, walked in carrying a crisp leather folder. "Good morning, Thaddeus, Clara." Arthur greeted them warm-heartedly, taking a seat at the desk. "I bring the final official dispatch from the Douglas County District Court and the State Land Registrar." "Welcome, Arthur," Thaddeus said, setting down his pen. "What is the final disposition from the judge?" Arthur opened his folder and handed 2 blue leather-bound documents to Thaddeus and Clara. "Yesterday afternoon, the Honorable Judge Rebecca Vance formally signed the final sentencing order for Bradford Hayes," Arthur reported with crisp legal precision. Pleading guilty to all 3 felony counts: attempted grand larceny, forgery of a state document, and financial exploitation, Bradford was sentenced to 8 years at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in Lincoln. "Is there any possibility of early parole?" Clara asked calmly. "Known for the first 5 years," Arthur assured her. "Because the crime targeted public state Treasury funds and involved elder fraud, the conviction carries mandatory minimum terms. Furthermore, the court has permanently revoked his real estate broker's license and placed a $100,000 restitution lien against his liquidated personal assets." "And his creditors in Council Bluffs?" Thaddeus inquired. "Completely blocked," Arthur smiled triumphantly. "The court ruled that all of Bradford's gambling and margin debts were strictly personal liabilities. They have zero legal claim against you, Clara, or any asset associated with the Sterling family." Clara opened her blue folder, seeing her official decree of dissolution of marriage with the Golden State seal stamped on the final page. Her maiden name, Sterling, was legally restored, and her personal savings were permanently protected. A deep, quiet sense of peace filled the room. The long, dark chapter was officially closed. Arthur Pendleton extracted a second portfolio from his briefcase, this one bound in thick maroon leather with gold foil lettering reading, "The Sterling Family Perpetual Land and Estate Trust." "This is the final piece of our legal structure, Thaddeus," Arthur explained, placing the portfolio between father and daughter. "The $500,000 eminent domain compensation payout from the state has been officially transferred from the temporary escrow account directly into this irrevocable trust." Clara leaned in, looking over the trust agreement. "How does the stewardship work now, Arthur?" "It is structured under a dual trustee judicial protocol," Arthur stated proudly. "Thaddeus and Clara are named as joint primary trustees. No asset, land title, or capital within this trust can ever be sold, leveraged, assigned, or transferred without both signatures, notarized verification, and a 30-day public registry notice. Even if someone tried to forge a single signature again, the state system would automatically freeze the transaction." Thaddeus looked at his daughter, his eyes filled with quiet pride and warmth. "This guarantees that your future, your veterinary center, and our family heritage are permanently safe from any outside predator, bad contract, or fraudulent power of attorney." "Thank you, Dad," Clara said softly, reaching out to hug him tightly. "You fought for us when everything was on the line." "A father protects what he builds, Clara," Thaddeus replied gently, wrapping his arms around her. "Truth and foresight will always stand taller than any cheap lie." An hour later, after Arthur had taken his leave with the finalized trust filings, Thaddeus put on his light spring jacket and walked out onto the front porch. The morning air was warm and sweet with the scent of fresh grass. Down at the edge of the property along North 30th Street, state surveying crews were setting up their equipment, preparing for the upcoming road expansion. Thaddeus walked down the porch steps, his boots crunching softly on the gravel driveway, and stopped beside the old elm tree at the corner of his lot. He pulled his black UV fountain pen from his coat pocket, admiring the smooth violet casing under the bright morning sunlight. He capped it carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. In his 42 years as a land appraiser, Thaddeus had seen greedy men try to alter boundary lines, forge deeds, and trick the elderly out of their life's work. But much like deep granite bedrock beneath the prairie, a life built on honesty, vigilance, and sharp intellect could never be shaken. Thaddeus looked back at his craftsman home, where Clara was waving to him from the porch window. The payout was secure.